Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. In this video, I'll show you how to use the blueprints to build a complete system. And first of all, we want to know what we need research-wise and such. So you don't actually have to use the depots from the get-go. Neither do you have to use the outposts from the get-go, which means you don't actually need bots to get started. You need, or you should have, you don't actually need, but you should have red belts. You obviously need combinators, because these stations do use combinators. You need the big power poles, and the entire train research, essentially. You'll want to have inserters, the bigger the better, but yeah. This can work with fast inserters, it's just more effective with stack inserters, but fast inserters work fine too. Right. And aside from that, if you check the previous video in the playlist, then you'll know about the scripts. You do need these things. You just don't have to have them in the depot. You don't need the global memory, you just need the provider, especially this one over here. I'm not sure you actually need this one. No, you pretty much don't need this one. You just need this one. You need the global item provider, right? And you need to update this with the script. If you're not playing vanilla, I believe this is set up for vanilla. So if you're playing vanilla, you're fine either way. But if you're playing with mods that add items, then you do need to update this with scripts and plop it down in your base where it has access to the global network, right? As you can see, via the green and red wire, it is connected to the global network, and it needs to be connected to the global network so that the stations, the memory of the stations, has something to reach to update itself. Okay. Right. So how do we build a system? I'm going to assume that you've unlocked bots and that you want to use the depots already right from the start. And let me actually delete the old version. So if you didn't know, I already uploaded this video once, but for whatever reason, it didn't work. Something in the recording process got messed up and made things difficult for me. So I need to re-record this, which is no biggie. I just have to delete what I have real quick and start over. Right, the bots will do the thing eventually, right? Okay. So these are the two books that you have. This is the version 7 and this is the Rails. The Rails are by ElderAxe, and it is a very useful system that allows you to very quickly print out a rail network. Quick disclaimer, I'm going to use the cheat mode so that this recording doesn't take too long, but it's still gonna be like an hour at least or something. As you can see, these are chunk aligned. So chunks are the big black borders. That's 32 by 32 tiles, and ElderAxe's system, as well as mine, is aligned to these chunks. ElderAxe's system is right-hand drive, and it is probably the best one that I've found. So I decided to make mine compatible with this one. If you have your own, you can adapt the system. It's not actually that difficult. I'll show you where you need to adapt things. Actually, right now, what the hell? Why not? Maybe this is a question that you have right from the start, but here. So this piece down here, you might have to change how the signals go for left-hand drive. But if you stick to right-hand drive, but you use a different layout up here, this is basically the part that you would need to change. And it doesn't touch directly on the rest of the system, so that's essentially all you have to really do. You just change these approaches, right? And that's actually it. As long as you're not left-hand drive, it's really easy. If you're left-hand drive, you're going to have to do some refactoring of the signals in the individual components of the blueprint book. It's going to take a little bit, but it's not difficult. It's just going to take a while. Right, so I'm going to assume that you're starting with, the Player's Depot, and then your first choice is which one do you want? Do you want the spacious big version, or do you want the smaller outpost-sized version? I'm going to go with the bigger one. That means that I'm going to take this blueprint. If you wanted a smaller one, you'd have to take the one from the outposts. Right. Because the actual station is a square, you can turn this however you want. In this case, I'm going to go sideways, just to demonstrate the fact that it'll work regardless of orientation. Oopsies. Here. That's what I wanted. And you'll notice, regardless of how I turn the depot, it'll still fit in nicely, right? That's the idea. Regardless of the orientation of the skeleton, your switches and your displays and stuff always have the same orientation. They always look the same. Okay, normally now I'd have to wait for bots to build this, but in this case, I don't. And one of the first things that I do is I check whether my providers are up to date, and I check that my memory is present. It should be. And I check that I only have one of each in this global network. So the global network obviously is handed to the rail system, and it just goes along with the rail system, just as you used to. Next thing to do is to make sure that my maintenance part, so on the right side, this is the maintenance, and I want to immediately turn that on so I don't forget later. Which means I give this, whoops, this switch, and I need different hotkeys, this switch, something to work with, which turns on the global network, and I can ignore this one. The next thing I do is I turn on the locomotives, and the first one immediately drives in. And you'll notice that it drives in a circle twice. For some reason, when I instantly blueprint this system, I immediately get a counter of 2 trains. I don't know why, or I used to know why, but I think I decided that it wasn't worth the effort to fix. It would have blown the remote, it would have blown up the size of the remote too much, something like that, I think. It's been a while, it's been like half a year since I made the system, so I've forgotten the details. But essentially, the first train is going to do 2 rounds, and then it'll be done, and that's fine. The next thing I want to do is I want to figure out what do I need next. Well, I want to build my first outpost, right? So I'm going to go over here to the remote, and I'm going to check my layout. Step 1 is indeed the one I want, because step 1 for the first outpost is exactly what I need. Step 2 will be the next one, but by default this print comes with the step 1. Let's give this something to work with. Quick explanation here. This is the switch that you use to enable a layout by turning it. Right? This is the switch that you use to send an empty layout without having to clear out the combinators down here. Right? So this bar is basically your layout, and it is set up for 10 wagons, but we only use 4. At this time, you can expand this if you want, but then you're going to have to resize this entire thing. But you could, this remote could handle 10 wagons. And this switch, or button kinda, lets you request a number of trains with the loadout that you sent in. So every turn currently gives me 1 extra train. If I change this number to say 5, 1 turn of the switch will give me 5 trains. Or I could just turn the switch 5 times with the 1 in here, right? Then over here we have an address elevator. This is currently turned off, and most likely you can forever ignore this unless you're building extra depots. Again, remember, if you're building extra depots, you have to get rid of the extra memory, and you have to get rid of the extra providers. But if you have extra depots, they need different addresses, right? And the address is saved in this combinator. So this is wagon 1, this is wagon 2, this is wagon 3, this is wagon 4. And if you have more depots, you would have to go in and you would have to rename this to 101, 102, and you get the idea. And the same is, of course, also true over here, right? Except it's white, not gray. And in the smaller depot, they also exist. They're just kind of hidden, right? So here, easy to see. And on the other end, not as easy to see. Is it over here? Yeah, right. Right, you can see here, these you would have to rename to +100. And that is also where the address elevator comes in. English difficult. If you turn this on, the remote, this remote is going to send the layouts to 1 plus 100, right? 2 plus 100, and so on. You get the idea. All right, what else do we have? We have a cargo capacity checker, and I'm actually going to go down here for this because this is easier to see on one screen. If you paste a loadout into any of these combinators, you see how many stacks the item in that loadout take up. This is 40 stacks, this is also 40 stacks, this is 27 stacks, 40 stacks. And you can check how many times you could basically fit that loadout into the same wagon. So I could fit this exactly twice, whatever loadout I have here. And you might say, okay, 27 plus 27 doesn't make 40. In this case it does, because it's counting stacks, and we have a couple partial stacks in here. So if you look in here, like this is a partial stack, right? So if I have another partial stack, that'll just be 1 stack in total. If you have too many, the display goes red. It also tells you how many you have. So in this case, we're now to 65 stacks, which obviously doesn't fit in one wagon. And you can use this anywhere that you have a remote and you print the cargo capacity checker. So in the depots and in the outposts, this is automatically present. But if you're out somewhere in the wilderness and you're looking to get more rails or whatever for your train, and you just build one in the wild and you connect it up to the global network, so the remote obviously does need connection to the global network, otherwise it can't communicate with the depot. So you build the remote somewhere, wherever you want, and you connect it to the global network, and you make sure that you have a train station where your trains can come to, your builder trains, and then you might want to also build a cargo capacity checker. The blueprints are all there. Actually, I need to make sure that I added the cargo capacity checker. I believe I forgot, but that's something that I can easily fix. That's not an issue. All right. I will update the blueprints with that later on. What next? Right. We know how to use the train now, so let's get on our way. And I should take the first spar here and go on. Okay. So I want to move to the side here maybe. Keep going. And let's build my first outpost right here. Next decision. How do I want my outpost to look? Do I want my many-to-many resource stations to be connected directly to, or well, connected, I mean in line with the outpost itself? Or do I want to separate the approach to the resource stations from the outpost, right? So if that is the case, if I go over here, I have an extra approach. I'll show you how that looks in a second, but let's build our first outpost directly connected. And I move up into the outpost. Oops, I get out of the train. And this square is where I build my outpost. And same story as before. Orientation of the skeleton doesn't matter. Your outpost is always looking the same. right? If we look in here, we see that the station is on, the outpost setup station is on, and if we go into the train, we can simply send it to the outpost setup, and it'll dock. And normally I might have to extract the materials from the train myself and let my bots build the outpost. Once the train is empty, it'll stay here. And the reason for that is this switch is not active. So over here, this turns the station on and off, and this switch tells the train whether or not it is allowed to leave. And this switch handles the inserters. So we're currently in phase 1, which means the train gets unloaded but not loaded. Phase 2 means the train gets loaded but not unloaded, and phase 3 means the inserters freeze. And you can just basically endlessly rotate through this. For now, you can ignore these. Up here we have again a remote, and we have built step 1. So next up we need to build step 2, and this is also already the default setup. So next thing to do is to send the loadout home and to request one of those trains. Right, so if I go back to the depot, I can see the train is being loaded. Well, first it needs to be unloaded. We have the blue lamps tell me we're in a trash cycle. The red lamps tell me we don't have the items that we want in there. Once the train is fully unloaded, yep, it's just there. You see the blue lamps are gone. The red lamps tell me we aren't loaded yet. These lamps tell me whether the loadout will fit the wagon or not. So I can see here I still have more than 3/4 space. Here I have a little less than 3/4 space. I'm almost full here, and I'm completely full here, right? These lamps are, and I forgot to explain that earlier, but these lamps are designed in such a way that you can see, okay, the train is moving. Let's forget about that for a second. These lamps are set up in a very specific way. If you go in, you will see, so this is the signal that tracks how many stacks the loadout will take up. So if the loadout takes up 1 stack or more, this lamp lights up. 5 stacks or more, this lamp lights up. 10 stacks or more, this lamp lights up. 11 stacks or more, this lamp lights up. Why this weird non-jump from 10 to 11 when I went from 5 to 10 here, and again from 11 to 15, from 15 to 20? Why do I have that 11 here? The reason is so I can see precisely whether I have a quarter, whether I have exactly a half, exactly 3/4, or exactly full. I do the same single unit jump here from 20 to 21 and from 30 to 31. If I have 3 lamps on, but not 4, I know that I have exactly 10 stacks. If I have half the lamps on, but not this one, I know that I have exactly 10 stacks, 20 stacks, yeah. That I have exactly 20 stacks, right? So I'm exactly half stack of the whole 40. If I have more than 40 stacks, this entire bar goes red. We can see that nowhere right now. Let's just enable the, you don't have to do this in the actual game. I'm just doing this so I can show you. This is what it looks like if the wagon cannot actually fit the loadout. In this case, you can ignore it. This is only red because these are the artillery wagons, and if you know, artillery munition takes up 1 slot per 1 shell, except in the artillery wagon where you can stack 100. So basically it's saying you can't stack 100 artillery shells in the 40 slots of a normal wagon, which is why it shows you the red bars here, but you can ignore this. This is calibrated to normal wagons, not artillery wagons. The green lamp over here tells me that the math of this wagon checks out. It has exactly the load it's supposed to have. If it's red, it has too many items, and I don't know if I still have that function present, but I used to. If it's yellow, that means I have too many items and the wagon needs to unload. And this is the lamp for trash cycle. If this is blue, the wagon is in a trash cycle and is getting emptied before it's being reloaded. This just checks the math. So these inserters keep track of what they move into the wagon, and these inserters keep track of what they remove from the wagon. The reason this is important is that you cannot read a train per wagon. You can only read the items present in the entire train, right? So if I want to know whether or not this wagon fits, I need to count myself what I'm putting into the wagon and what I'm pulling out of the wagon. So if you go and you remove something, the math won't check out. It won't know, right? I should say the math will check out, but it'll be corrupted because you messed with the wagon. And this system can't know that because the inserters didn't move it. However, this is a different story. This checks the true state of the entire train versus the entire loadout. So it compares, I want this on the train. Does the train have it? Yes, then I'm green. No, I'm not green. And again, we have the blue lights here for the trash cycle. So that's how you can read the depot, and it's exactly the same story over here. Yeah, okay. We're back up here. So our train with the loadout 2 is waiting for us to remove this train. First, let's go in and print out step 2. And what this does is it immediately allows the train to leave, and the next train should be moving in as soon as here. Something very important to know about step 2. You have to enable this train, and it is intentionally in the way so that you don't forget. This train will move up to the station and register itself to the circuit. You want to have each maintenance/artillery train dedicated to one station and have each station dedicated to one train. It is possible to manually mess the system up by taking one artillery train to multiple bases. You don't want to do that, and you don't actually need to get in one of these trains ever yourself anyway. Or if you do, it's because maybe you want to move with the train or whatever, I don't know. But you basically never need to get into this train. It handles itself automatically. So what do we have here? Since I'm already talking about it, let's talk about the maintenance side first. So once you put the train on automatic, it'll move up to the station, it'll stop here for a second, it'll register itself. The station notices that the train is empty and therefore sends it home to be restocked. Once this specific maintenance train has arrived in the depot sends out the ID of this train. If you look now on the right side while I'm mousing over, you see train ID 38,216. That is a unique ID that only this train will ever have. And this is the ID that is saved into the circuitry. So if the depot sends that ID across the global network, this outpost recognizes that ID and sends the layout for this train back to the depot. The train gets loaded with the depot, and because we have activated it earlier on when we first built the depot, the train is dispatched back to this outpost. And if it is the correct train with the correct ID, this station turns itself off. Why is this important? So if you have, I don't know, hundreds of outposts and multiple trains dispatch themselves at the same time, it can happen, it is rare, but it can happen that the wrong trains drive to the wrong outposts. This does not break the system. All that happens is the train goes in here. It unloads whatever the station wants. This is intentional. We don't want the station to run dry just because the wrong train is in here. But the wrong train is then not allowed to stay around. The station does not turn itself off. Instead, the train is forced to move on. It'll go back to the depot, restock itself, and try again. In the meantime, while that happens, the correct train is very likely to have arrived back into this station, has unloaded whatever was missing, and has turned the station off because it is the correct train, right? That means that the station is now taken offline, and the previous train that was in here by mistake cannot actually approach the station anymore because it's turned off, right? So it's very likely that that train will then find the correct station, and in that way, basically, the more trains you have that find the right station, the faster the entire system resolves itself. And I've tried this with like 200 trains once, and the entire system settled itself in like 5 minutes. So it goes very quickly. And it doesn't let the stations run dry while it's settling itself either, because like I said, the stations do take out of even the wrong train what they need, right? So the remote is the same story. The loadout is the same story. You have a couple prepared loadouts here. You can, of course, modify these as you want. If this station were one that took care of, let's say, nuclear power generation, you might want to have uranium fuel cells there, or maybe if this is the station where you constantly leave to kill biters and you don't have all the tech yet, maybe you want fishes or whatever. The switches, so this switch forces the train to leave. I can show you. Despite the train being fully stocked and the station not actually needing anything, by activating the switch, I force the train to leave. You'll notice that the station is still turned off. It'll turn itself on once the train is in the depot, right? So it is now, and we see the station has turned itself on. This is also intended. The station is only on if the train that belongs to this station has locked itself into the depot. And this is your reset button. If for whatever reason this station is turned off now when it should be turned on, which means the train belonging to the station is in the depot, but something somehow fucked up, maybe you manually moved the train or whatever, and you need to make sure that the station is turned on so that the train that belongs to the station can actually come here, you can use this inserter to basically reset the station and force it to be on. Train comes back. Station turns off. If I want to force it on now, it would immediately turn itself off again. If you see, you can see it's not turned on. The reason for this is that the correct train is actually present. So there's no reason for the station to turn itself on. The only time that you need to turn the station on is basically if you want the correct train to come back here and for some reason it didn't happen. Now, what do you do if you manage to somehow corrupt the memory by going into this train and driving it into another fresh station that it hasn't seen its own train yet, and you accidentally recorded the same train to 2 different stations? A quick note here: once the ID has been logged in, you cannot remove it unless by deleting the correct combinator. I'll go over that in a second. So even if I took another train, another maintenance train now, and drove it into the station, it would not register itself onto the station. It only takes one ID once. It does not take another ID once it has one. So what do you do if you accidentally took the same train to the same stations and now it's recorded into both stations and you actually need to remove the train from one of these stations so that you can register the correct train to that? The memory is the one with all the T's. Alt here. This is the memory cell. You can either simply go and delete the memory, and you'll notice the train was forced to leave because now the station no longer recognizes the train. So the train goes back to the depot, and once it comes back in here, it'll read itself into this memory again, and then it'll be dedicated to the station again. Another function, if you forget where this is of course you can simply delete a bunch of these combinators. You'll probably hit the right one, and then you can just go and reprint the step 2. You can just reprint this over here, right? But then of course you need to make sure that you delete the extra train. You only need one, right? So what is this bar? This is connected. Well, not physically connected, but this is basically the same layout as the one that you put in here. This is the bar that tells the station what to unload. So this is the bar that tells the depot what to load onto the train, and this is the bar that tells the station what to unload. This is important because of the whole thing earlier that I explained about wrong trains still being unloaded, but only with the items that this current station actually wants, and that's handled here. So if I say I have another train that has these uranium fuel cells and it mistakenly drives to the stations, the uranium fuel cells will not be unloaded here because they're not present. This combinator is responsible for the fraction of the loadout that is unloaded into the station. So generally the system considers the train to be like a mobile depot, and you can say how much of the mobile depot you want to be unloaded at any time. In this case, the combinator is set to 1/3. This is a fraction, this is not a percentage. So not 3 or 30%, this is 1/3. And over here we have one whole. So if you want the entire loadout that you have here unloaded from the train, you can use this combinator instead and just copy that over. This is 1/2, 1/3, 1/4. And this is the alarm. So if you have 1/10 only of whatever is in here in the chests, it'll sound you an alarm because you should never reach only 1/10, right? As soon as I'm at 1/3, the train will be sent back home to reload. Or what exactly was the logic? I think right, so the station wants to unload 1/3 of that. If it can't, it sends a signal to the train to go and get restocked. Right, so this is handled by this 1/3. It's both how much is unloaded, and as soon as it cannot be unloaded anymore, as soon as I can't reach the 1/3, the train is sent home. If I go down to 1/10, I also sound an alarm so that I know that I need to fix my production. Maybe I'm running out of ammo or whatever, right? Anyway, I need to get going and fix that. What did I want to say? There was something I wanted to say. Right, you can of course also change the numbers in here for ease of use. I simply always go and just copy that in here and in here, and I'm done. Yes, this should cross-connect, it is correct. But I can also, of course, go, okay, I don't actually want to have this. So let's say maybe you prefer to actually see the actual numbers of stuff to be unloaded. So you could go and you could say, okay, I'm going to take the whole into this combinator, and as you can see, the train is getting unloaded again. Going to take the entirety of the of this bar into the combinator, but I manually change all the numbers, right? And yep, in this case, so we have I'm sorry, this is slightly confusing probably, but let me say this. This does not say unload the entire train. It only says unload what you have in the loadout here. In this entire unload that. Which means that if I change the numbers here from what is up here, I can basically modify every single item manually. But I just stick to the 1/3. For me, this is more than enough. It always works. I've never had an issue with it. Next on here we have the pack system. These stations are supposed to be turned off most of the time, unless it is precisely the station that you want to go into. They are also by default turned off, as you can see. You can use this switch just like any other switch if you feed in an item or turn it with an item. You can turn the stations on and off. Yeah, I'll show you. Right, so turn on. And this down here you can mostly ignore. This is for remote turning on and off. So if I go out of alt mode, you can see currently this combinator is turned off. If I turn it on, I force the station to turn on. And so this is based on impulses. I need to give the system an impulse to toggle the station, right? So just because I turn the combinator on and off, this doesn't turn the station on and off. I need to give it an actual impulse. And you use this part if you need to turn the station on and off remotely. So if you're not present, if you're maybe in the depot and you want to, you get in your train. I don't actually want to get in there right now. I'll explain the schedule in a second. But if you're in the depot, you'd get in here and you'd use these blueprints for the packs. And this has the combinator that I just turned on and off enabled, and this has the combinator disabled. So you'd go in here, you'd get on the map, you'd find the pack station that you want to go to, you'd print it over this, you'd see, okay, my lamps are on, the station is now turned on. If I'm already sitting in my train, which you should be at this point, your train would automatically be moving out to the station now. And if you want to turn this off, so when the train arrives in the station, it automatically turns the station off. But if for whatever reason you have multiple of these stations turned on and you forgot about it, maybe you turned one on and then you didn't actually drive all the way here with the train and you forgot to manually turn it off, and now it's messing with your pack system, you can go and basically do this here. Now the thing is turned off, but remember, you need an actual impulse to toggle the station, so you go in here and handle that. And now the station is turned off, and you can either leave it like this because it doesn't really matter, or you can also turn this combinator off. And that's basically how you control this via the map. All right, what do we see here? We're currently on manual, so I wouldn't have left anyway. So the schedule of the packs, sorry, need to stretch. The schedule of the pack system is handled in such a way that mostly you only ever need to get into the train and or turn pack stations on that you want to go to. You can of course also with Control-click command the train to go to wherever you want. It isn't gonna break it or anything. The pack stations are the ones in outposts. The PAX depot is, well, the PAX depot. The PAX depot stations are always on. These do not have any circuitry, they're just always on. The pack stations are a bit different. As you saw, they have circuitry. Plus, as soon as, let me actually move backwards a little bit and enable this. As soon as a train arrives in one of these pack stations, it turns itself off, which takes it off the grid and it doesn't mess up your pack system thereafter, right? So let's say you're in your depot. You're in your depot and you need to fix something. Okay, well, I'm not sure why we're taking the long way, but we are. You're in your depot and you say, okay, I want to change something about this outpost. I'm currently on a timer. Usually this would have run out by now, right? Because you're doing stuff, 30 seconds would have passed. So you go, okay, I can either go here manually or I can use the remote, go onto the map, find the correct pack station, turn it on, and I do this while I'm sitting in the train. This is important. The PAX depot does not check for passenger present, and this is intentional. So you want to be in your train by the time that you enable the pack station that you're going to, right? You arrive, the pack station turns itself off, you get out of the train, you move away. The train counts down to 30 seconds, but it will not continue moving unless you also get in the train again, right? This is intentional. You'll find that basically every outpost always has a train present. And the idea is that if you're done working here, all you need to do is you get in your train, and as soon as the 30 seconds are up, the train will automatically leave you. Okay, we're done with that. This is the entire outpost explained. No, it's not. Shit, I completely forgot this slide. All right, so what switches do we have here? As before, this turns the station itself on and off. This determines whether or not trains are allowed to leave once having been unloaded. Again, this handles whether or not the inserters load the train, unload the train, or don't do anything. This is handy if you are calling for a train that you don't actually want to be interacting with the station. You actually just want the train to arrive so that you can take it to your next outpost or whatever. So that's when you would be using this. And this is the trash cycle. Once you are done building your stations and your outpost, and you're about to leave, you turn on the trash cycle, and this will simply call for empty trains from the stage, from the depot, and they will one by one be loaded with the items and then drive back to the depot, unload, and come back to take every item that is here until your station, your outpost inventory is completely empty. On this side at least. It does not touch this side, and this is intentional because obviously you want your maintenance stuff to remain, right? But this side all completely gets emptied. Down here you have a display that tracks how much space you have left in your system. It doesn't track how full it is, it tracks how much is left, how much is empty, right? So right now this lamp is off. That tells me that we have, should be 1/10. Yep, 1/10 of the inventory is already filled up. And the more lamps go off, the more lamps go off, the less space you have. If I think it's this top one, if this is red and the alarm goes, that you know that your outpost storage is completely full. There's just no space anymore. And this was originally an X. So I want to make this red instead. Yeah, maybe, or whatever. Okay. On this side, this is the display that guesstimates how many trains, or tells you how many trains the station guesses that you're going to need to empty the inventory once you have the trash cycle enabled. This is not accurate, and the reason for that is that if you have enough items in here to fill one train exactly, and if they're spread over 4 chests exactly, 4 wagons, that's fine. You actually do need only one train. But if they all are stacked in one wagon, you're going to need 4 trains instead, right? Logically. The problem is that this circuitry doesn't read per wagon. It only reads for the entire train. So it might say, okay, I need 1 train for this, and so it shows you 1 train, but in actuality you need 4 trains, and it doesn't know that. So the fewer lamps are active, the more likely is that you actually need a couple more trains than it says. The more lamps you are active, the more accurate it gets. So if you have all 10 lamps active, it's probably true that you need 10 trains. Maybe you need 11 or something, right? But most likely it's accurate at 10 and more trains. And yes, we are finally done with the outpost. Thank you for sticking around so long. Let's get on to the stations. We have built our outpost. We need to call for, let's say we want to load iron ore here. So we call for the We call for the solid loading loadout. We send that loadout home and request 1 train. The train gets loaded. Once it's done, I'll hear the chime that tells me that the train has left. But meanwhile, I'm going to pretend that I have the materials already, and I'm just going to build the thing. Solid loading. And as you can see, it just like everything else, it snaps. Because this one is 1.5 chunks tall, it snaps every 1.5 chunks. Put that in here. All right, you can hear the alarm. The alarm is important. You don't want to ignore it. Now, because this is a loading station, it'll take care of itself. The alarm tells you, can we actually see it? There, right at the bottom, item memory not primed. The item memory keeps track of what you have in these chests. which is why loading stations basically take care of the alarm themselves, because you'd have belts or bots delivering the items, and they would automatically arrive in the chests and therefore automatically set the memory. For the purposes of recording this, let me turn this off. And let's see, what do we have here? Well, obviously, we have the inserter and we have the station inventory. We have the station itself. And one of the first things that we need to do is we need to rename the station according to what we have. In this case, I'm going to go with FE for iron. And this station is now dedicated to iron ore. I have a couple displays here. The right one, or the colorful one, tracks how many trains the station can serve. We cannot serve any trains right now because obviously this is a loading station, which means it needs items to serve trains. It has none, therefore it can serve no trains, therefore no lamps are on. And aside from that, therefore, you can see it on the red here, or if you turn off alt mode, you can see here the station is actually turned off, right? As soon as we get items, that changes. And this display keeps track of how many wagons in addition to the trains you can load. So if I have, let's say, 5 trains and 1 lamp, that tells me I can load 5 trains and 1 wagon. This is kind of gimmicky, but I like it. Then we have a bunch of settings combinators here. This one, disable train transmission. So this one is responsible for transmitting how many trains the trains need. If you turn it off, basically your depots don't dispatch trains anymore, and we'll get your train yards. I mean, not depots. Your train yards don't dispatch trains anymore. Train yards, we'll get into those in a second. This is your chests. This is important if you have modded games or if you change the size of the station. By the way, these stations, as you can see, are very simple to extend for larger train sizes, right? I'm going with 1 for 1 trains at the start, so locomotive, 4 wagons and 1 locomotive. That's my default train size, but you can go way bigger if you want, very easily. And if you do, you have to go into this combinator and you have to change the settings here. So you can see here steel chest. This is responsible for, or this tells the station the size of the chests and then the number of the chests. K is the number of chests. I have currently 48 chests. The mouse, if I mark it, you can see here 48 chests. That is correct. And each chest has 48 slots. Right, you can see that here. If you are confused which is which, you can use this as a guide. This is for the trains. We have currently 4 wagons, and each wagon has a size of 40 slots. And that's basically the same over here. 4 wagons, 48 chests, 40 slots, 48 slots. Per wagon, of course. So in this case, 40 slots per wagon and 48 slots per chest, obviously. Right. This combinator turns your station on and off. So currently, the station is off because it can't serve trains. But if you want to, for whatever reason, force the station to be off all the time, for whatever reason, you either turn this combinator off or you put this on 0 instead of 1. And here is the threshold of how many trains the station has to serve at least to turn itself on after it's been turned off. These days, this is mostly gimmicky. It's not really needed anymore. I still like it because it serves as a display. So the station will be turned off unless it can serve at least 1 train. That's the T here. And over here, I can turn this entire system on and off. I mean the threshold system. But I like to have it on because this way I can see, okay. Okay, I can't really see it because I'm in the way. I can see here this station is actually currently off. which means it can't serve enough trains. It's also helpful in stuff like, I can see here, this outpost setup station is currently turned on, therefore this one, the dummy station, is turned off, or I can say, okay, here. Basically the same idea as here. I can see on a distance from the map whether or not the stations are active or not. And that's why I still have it, but functionally it basically isn't necessary anymore. Instead, the depot only, or the station only requests trains if it can actually serve an entire train. But yeah. What else? Memory. So, as you might have noted on the map, our alarm is still going. Why is it going? Because you can see it over here. There is no item recorded to the memory. Apropos memory, I forgot this earlier, but I wanted to show you now that the train is back. This is the memory, right? If you check the right side of the screen, it now has an output signal, which means this train ID is saved to the station now. If I remove this, the station wouldn't recognize the train anymore and would therefore force it to move again. Right, so that's that. And similarly, I also have a memory here, which is currently empty. It has no output signal. Once it does, and let me show you how that looks. Here. So let's pretend these are belts that are bringing in the materials from an iron mine. No, I want this here. Bloody hell. No, it's working. Okay, didn't work earlier. Actually, let's do it simpler. Brain dead. Just brain dead. There you go. Alright. You'll notice the lamp is now lit up. If you mouse over the combinator, we can see here it's got an output signal, which means it has indeed saved the item that this station serves to memory. This is useful, first of all, because it tells us what kind of train we need here. And the station it is now asking for 3 trains and 4 trains. You can see here 2 wagons, 3 wagons, full train, 5 trains and 2 wagons, 3 wagons, and so on. But basically, this information is used to encode the signal to the train yards how many trains of what type to dispatch. And further, this is also used in the alarm system to check whether or not we have any contamination. So if a train moves in to, let's say, an iron ore station, but for whatever reason it has copper ore loaded, the train will not be allowed to unload because copper ore is obviously not iron ore. And if I simulate this, there you see we have an alarm going. It tells me something is wrong. The memory is getting fucked up by this double information. Is it also transmitting this? No, it is not. Or yes, it is. I might have to fix that. There you go. I've cleaned up the system. Alarm is silent, and it can now work as it should again. All right, and that's basically it for the loading stations. Simple as that. Next, we need an unloading station, and for this, I'm going to show you how the system works if you don't have an outpost there. It's really simple. It's just I basically connect my stations directly to the network. And again, that's incorrect because these are connected directly to, but they're just in line with an outpost. And here, there's no outpost. Station. Solid unloading. print that out, and you can hear the alarm. This is an unloading station, which means that the items aren't going to be automatically transported into the chest, which means the memory cannot update itself automatically. That also means that this station is not calling for trains even if it needs the trains. So what you do is you can either take the item that this station is supposed to serve and put it into one of the chests, or you can go in here, modify this to be the item that you want it to be, turn this combinator on, and turn it off again. You want this combinator to be turned off, because otherwise it basically messes with your actual levels. Now, just one is probably not an issue. It's probably fine if this combinator is on, but if you want to be 100% accurate, you'd have to turn this off again, because basically what this does, it simulates items in the chests, right? So that the memory can actually save it. And this is for unloading stations only. You can now just leave this as you want, or you can delete it. Doesn't matter. The memory has it saved and it's fine. You also need to once again change the name of this. FE, save, and you are done. You're ready. So where are the trains? For those, we need the train yard, of course. And let's just put the train yard right next to this. Here, train yards are under stations. You can move them into outposts if you want. I always click on the wrong one. You have two different kinds of train yards. You have the solids and you have the fluids. The difference is basically the trains, right? So whether you have cargo wagons or whether you have tanker wagons. You also have extensions, but you start with this one. And because I don't have size downways, I need to build upwards. Here's an outpost. This outpost is useful because this might be where you go to, let's see, what did I want? Outpost step 2. Because here you could go into the maintenance or the builder, depending on which way you want to do it. And you could make sure that this outpost always has a stock of trains and cargo wagons available, right? You'll notice that I immediately started the train up. If I wanted to mess up the system, I would have taken the train from the other outpost and would have driven it over here before I would have put in this wagon. That would basically be how I would manually corrupt the system. And if that happens, I would need to delete the memory and send the correct train in here. But yeah, the idea you've already caught on at this point, I think, right? So what do we need to do here? First of all, and this is the one part where probably a lot of user error is going to happen, this here. This needs to change. This needs to be the item that this train yard is supposed to serve. And this is important because this is what you use to, and I just had an idea on how I might actually be able to centralize the entire train yard, but I don't want to do that for another reason. That's a bad idea. I'll just forget about that. This is basically your filter. What this does, it reads the correct signal from the global network. We can see here we have 917,000 iron ore. It takes that signal and that signal only, feeds it into here, and it gets split up. It gets decoded according to how many trains of what type I want. Do I want empty trains or full trains to serve iron ore? And the decoding basically happens in the upper and lower bits of these railway stations. Is it, I forget, is it 16 bits or 32 bits total? One of the two, I forget. I think 32 bits. So the upper bits would be either the loading or unloading trains, and the lower bits would be the other one. I forget which way around it is. It's been half a year since I made this, so I've forgotten the details. I'd have to read into it. Actually, I can just This is the higher bits, I think, and this is the lower bits, right? So trains required to unload, no, trains required to load. So empty trains are lower bits and full trains are the higher bits. Basically, you can imagine I take the lower and higher bits, add them together on the global network. That gets transmitted to the train yard, and the train yard takes that signal and pulls it apart into higher and lower bits again by masking the other one in each case. So this is a little bit of bit magic. It's complicated to explain on the go if you want to learn about that. It's called bit masking. That's basically what I do here. So I get a big number and I just blot out the half that doesn't interest me, right? So for empty trains, I blot out the higher half, and for full trains, I blot out the lower half, and that tells me then how many trains the stations actually want of that type. And it can I think like 10,000 or something trains of a type or something, so you have plenty of bandwidth there for trains. And based on the numbers, it'll dispatch the correct trains. So what do we need to do? First of all, this is a train yard. It has stations. We need to rename the stations, in this case to FE. And we copy that onto, let's make sure we got all the stations, right? And further, so this is our template train. You just leave this here always. It'll be, you adjust it once and then you can use it to add more trains at any time via blueprinting or whatever you want to do. So I have solid train yard, all of these, and I need these to be FE instead. So what I do is FE train yard, FE loading, FE train yard again, and FE unloading, right? The order train yard, loading, train yard, unloading, train yard, loading, train yard, unloading, that works. Let's fix the conditions. FE train yard, circuit condition D equals 1. That's correct, we can delete this. Full cargo and empty cargo, which means we can delete this and this. And then we need to adjust the final one, circuit condition D equals 1, which means we can delete this one. Train yard loading, train yard unloading, and the train yard always has a circuit condition of D for dispatch equals 1, the train gets to go. Okay, copy that onto all the other trains. So add a little bit so it goes faster. Right. All the trains have it now. Let's put them all on automatic. And if you're wondering, I'm using a mod for this. If you go vanilla, you'll have to go into every train and put it on manually. There you go. And it should be working entirely now. Let's see. Okay, this train is full. Oh, I forgot to turn off debugging. Okay. And the train is actually immediately required, which is why it gets to leave. It gets to go to the unloading station. And we can see that the unloading station is on. Train gets unloaded. And okay, so this lamp is now turned on because we have items in here. You can of course go in here and check, but I didn't think of that when I made this. But yeah, this lamp is of course on because now we have a positive signal. So I might just delete this once I'm done updating, right? Once I'm done priming the memory, I mean. Right, so this station is slowly going to fill up. You'll see that the numbers of trains it can serve slowly diminishes. And here's a little bit of a traffic jam because there's just a lot of trains the station can serve. Usually this would go down a little bit. You wouldn't have as many trains because belts can because this system actually loads the train fairly fast. So the chest might not always be full, or you get the idea. Once, and I'm going to speed time up for this a little bit. Once the station turns itself off, there you go, it's turned itself off because it can't serve enough trains anymore. What'll happen is that the trains that are full, that have loaded themselves up, will start to stack up in the stacker. And because I'm going at 64 speed, I'm kind of moving slow here with the camera. You can see here these trains are now all slowly filling up, and they're just simply waiting until an unloading station needs them again. Right, so if I go in here and I empty the chests, the station turns itself on again, and suddenly our trains are moving again. Now, what if you need more trains? I do have a stacker extension blueprint in here too. And again, it snaps to the grid. And you'll notice that the top two rails, or if I rotate it to fit this, the bottom two rails do not have the train on it. That's intentional because they overlap with the rails, with the two slots of the previous train yard stackers. That is intentional because, as you might see here, the signal wires go from slot to slot. Right. So simply paste that over, and you have to go and take the train, copy the train over, take the station name, FETI, and remember that because you pasted over the old ones, the last two slots that used to be called FETY are now back to solid TY, so you're going to have to also edit those back to what they're supposed to be. And now they should all be FETY. They are indeed, and we can activate the trains. And now these trains are all going to slowly get themselves loaded up with resources and drive back to the stacker and wait here until they're needed. This entire system always only dispatches exactly as many trains as can be served by the station. Of course, it's a bit of a wave, it's a bit of a traffic jam, but it'll clear itself up automatically. And in real life, so to say, you shouldn't get many of these situations in the first place anyway. Okay. That's actually pretty much it. The system is not difficult to use, it is fairly easy to use. It doesn't allow for too many user errors, but if you run into a problem and you can't figure out the cause, don't hesitate to write me on Reddit. I will publish this on Reddit. This is probably also where you found the link. Or you can also write in one of the videos, and you'll just simply give me you'll upload your save to Google Drive or whatever. You'll give me a link. I'll check out the issue and fix it, and then I'll record the whole thing also so that you can see what I did, what my thought processes were and stuff like that. So don't hesitate to speak up if you have an issue with the system. Yeah, these displays basically keep track of how many slots you have in the train yard at all. So we have here, that's 43 slots. We have 2 empty trains and we have 17 full trains. That is indeed 43 slots. You might want to rotate those for yourself. All you need to do is you need to remember where this connects to, right? You need to remember that, which you can fairly easily do simply by not disconnecting all of them at the same time, just taking one, rotating that around. Where did it connect to? I happen to know it connects down here, but I can look over here. So which combinator was that? Yes, so this connects to this one. So I can just take the wire and take it like this or whatever, right? Or just move this combinator over and make it a little bit nicer. So you can rotate these as you want. I thought about making these square as well so that you can just basically plug and play this in later on, but I decided it just wasn't really worth the effort. Okay. Thank you for watching. Oh yes, one thing that I might want to add here, you can of course have the stations, twice the wrong one. You can of course mix and match the stations as you want. So I have solid loading here. I can have also solid unloading in the same one, and I can have fluid loading, fluid unloading here. They don't interfere with each other. Of course, the fluid stations tend to be very high throughput on the trains, right? Because a good one loads the train almost instantly, so there is a very, very high throughput, and this is only a single track approach. This could be a bit of a problem. So if you notice that this is just not enough bandwidth, you might want to add a second approach. And if you do, if you go into the station blueprint and you check these, so these allow you to simply add more space in between of individual stations. But let me actually just show you how that looks. You can stack up normal stations one after the other, just like this, right? It works fine. It works good. You can also add a spacing in between if you want to, for whatever reason. Maybe there's a lot of space here. This is good for belts, as you might be able to see somewhere over here. This is good space for belts, right? But of course, with this much space, you could also actually directly fit factory in there, right? So if that's what you want to do and it's almost enough, but not quite, you can add these extensions here, right? As many as you want. And they connect it to the global network all the way through. This is important, and you need that for the stations that might be up here to work. And then you can add more stations, or you can do, let me actually add one more station here. And this might be basically your next approach, right? So how that wants to look doesn't really, it doesn't need to look nice right now. It's just showing how it works after all. And then you can use the switch from outer to inner to move. Oh, I need to, of course, I need to turn that around. Whoops. There you go. You can use the switch. Where are we? Here. Now it's working as it should be. You can use this outer to inner switch to move an approach to be on the inside. And if I now add another station in here, we can see that so this is approach 1, approach 2 moves in. Approach 1 ends here, right? It only feeds this station. Approach 2 continues on, is transferred to the inside. and feed station 2 and any other station that might have stuck on directly on top. And I could of course repeat this process with the switch as many times as I want to. Where are we here? Stations. Add this as many times as I want to. And now I would have an approach number 3. So approach 1, 2, 3. And if I follow this one, it gets also transferred to the inside and would feed the next station here, right? So that's what the switch is for. This is very useful if you have high traffic stations and you want to not overburden single track approaches too much. You can of course further augment this by, for example, removing this here. So any train that wants to go into approach 1 has to go on the outside track, and then for approach 2 or 3 you could maybe have only the inside track but not the outside track, and then you would basically have parallel tracks that feed different high density, highly dense traffic stations there. And I think I finally really do have it all. Thank you for watching.